Thank you once again for all the respected delegates and the Rajanna sir, professor and HOD of the Nidana department, and kindly forgive me if I am unable to present the topic in your perspective, because I will present the modern medicine part of the seasonal diseases in India. This is like very difficult to present all the diseases of seasonality in 1 hour, but I will try to cover the important aspects, like what are the important diseases in each and every season. For this, and I will go through data from a infectious disease hospital where they encountered what are the common diseases in 1 year of time. So I took that as a parameter and I try to present those diseases which are common in around our subcontinent. So the communicable diseases remain the leading cause of morbidity and mortality in the developing countries, as the disease patterns are changed constantly. The seasonality for these diseases is a common phenomenon in all these regions. However, the mechanisms responsible for the epidemiological consequences of this seasonal variation are poorly understood. For this, we have to have the knowledge and analysis of the proper data. Then only we can predict the natural disease outcomes and major outbreaks also. So I took a data from an infectious disease hospital that is Sir Ronald Ross Infectious Disease Hospital from Hyderabad. This is also called as Fever Hospital. They have almost 60,000 infectious diseases were admitted in a year, and among these are the various distribution of the diseases in various months. Like if you see the viral fever, this is peaking from the July and it will go and it will shoot into the October, November, and it is gradually declining, and over a period of and again it is slowly picking up and down and again, but the peak is usually from the monsoon season where the mosquitoes are starts rising, where the vector-borne diseases are predominantly common. And the next thing is the acute diarrheal diseases, which is throughout the year more or less common, but they are most common in this first part of the year. The other diseases include the enteric fever throughout the year. Malaria, fortunately, the trend is decreasing towards the less malaria cases now. Only few states are with more malaria cases, and measles, mumps, chickenpox, and the hepatitis are the other diseases. They are usually seen in the whole year. But there are some disease patterns are there. I'll try to explain the. Sorry, I got disconnected. Yeah. So these are the 4 major group viruses causing viral hemorrhagic fevers. They are arenaviruses, bunniaviruses, filoviruses, and flaviviruses. And the flaviviruses are the important brunt on our subcontinent because dengue is the most common. These all are RNA viruses enveloped in a lipid coating. The survival is dependent on the animal or insect host for the natural reservoir. So if you see the arenaviruses, fortunately we are less commonly having these arenaviruses in our subcontinents, the genuine Machupo virus, Abia viruses, all these Lassa virus, Lassa fever, all these are less common. But we have seen few cases of Crimean Congo fever in around 2011 to 2012 in around Gujarat and the surrounding states, and the mortality rate is quite high. 30% of the mortality we encountered with this. The hantaviruses, recently we have encountered few cases of hantaviruses also, and it is transmitted by the rats. The Rift Valley fever is fortunately not here. The Ebola is a river named from the African subcontinent, the African continent, where this is the commonest viral hemorrhagic fever in around the Zambia, Zaire, Sudan, and Republic of Congo. The Marburg is another city name in the Germany where this was first isolated, and these filoviruses causes the viral hemorrhagic fevers. If you come to Flaviviridae, these are the commonest fevers in a country. The Casanova forest disease. The Casanova forest is the very sticky Casanova forest region in the Karnataka state, where they have first encountered this Casanova forest disease, and this is transmitted by a hard tick. The yellow fever, dengue are transmitted by Aedes aegypti, which is also called as the tiger mosquito. The two new families, the Paramyxoviridae, predominantly Nipah virus, and the Coronaviridae, we know we are encountered, we are facing the greatest pandemic ever seen now. The Nipah viruses cases also recently encountered in Kerala. Around 18 cases of Nipah virus cases we encountered in 2018 in the Kerala of Mallupuram and Kozhikode districts, where the fruit bats are the predominant vectors. Even the COVID also, they are assuming that the first encountered the transmission from the animals is from the fruit bats. They have eaten the bats, and the virus is spread from the bats they are suspecting now. So what is the CDC guidelines? What is the definition for viral hemorrhagic fever? That a person with acute onset of disease with all of the following clinical findings, the fever of more than 104 degrees Fahrenheit, and one or more of the following clinical findings includes the severe headache, retroorbital pain, the myalgias, erythematous maculopapular rashes on the trunk with fine desquamation and vomitings, diarrhea, pharyngitis, the abdominal pain, bleeding does not related to the injury, retrosternal chest pain, especially arenaviruses, and the proteinuria. The predominant signs and symptoms are described in this. The Ebola virus, Marburg viruses are not common in India, fortunately, but all the viral fevers are having the predominantly high-grade fever, sudden onset, high-grade fevers of 103 to 104 degree Fahrenheit with various myalgias, vomitings, pain, abdomen, conjunctival suffusion, hemorrhagic manifestations. And the Flaviviridae transmission, these are predominantly by arthropod vector-borne diseases. The yellow fever and dengue fever are the common. The Aedes aegypti, this Aedes yellow dengue fever is having two cycles. The sylvatic cycle is from the forest regions, and the urban cycle is from the what we have encountered, what we have transmitted from the because the man entered into the forest and acquired this dengue virus. You know what's happening? Suddenly the net is very unstable. Very sorry for that. Yeah, this is a nuclear capsid, and these are the genomic RNA. See, this is the dengue transmission. If you see the southern hemisphere, especially the Southeast Asian region and this Western Pacific region is the commonly involved area for the dengue transmission. Around 70% of the population at risk for dengue worldwide, and these are predominantly living in Southeast Asian region and Western Pacific region, which bear nearly 75% of the current global burden. Dengue epidemiology in India has dramatically changed over the last few decades. If you see, the first major worldwide, nationwide outbreak of dengue hemorrhagic fever happened in 1996 in the Delhi, followed by it is expanded all over the nation. Now it is pan-India disease. The world, about 50 to 100 million dengue infections are they're notified by WHO every year, and around 5 lakh individuals hospitalized with the dengue hemorrhagic fever, mainly in our Southeast Asian region. The pan-India proportions are notified with the dengue. Among these, the outbreaks and deaths have been reported from the northern states of Haryana, Punjab, and UP, southern states of Andhra, Tamil Nadu, and Karnataka, western states of Gujarat and Rajasthan, and even the eastern states of West Bengal also. In fact, the case fatality rate varies from 1%, above 1% to 4% over the last 10 years. The climate variability and dengue incidence, the highest abundance of mean temperature is 20 degrees, and the accumulated rainfall more than 150 mm causes the mosquito transmission. This is Aedes aegypti mosquito transmission. When the decline of egg laying monthly mean temperature is, when the temperature is less than 16.5 degrees, the mosquitoes cannot survive and cannot transmit the disease. If it is less than 14.8 degrees centigrade, even the eggs also cannot survive of the mosquitoes. So virus replication, this is proportionally increases with the temperature. Transmission of pathogen is not at all happened below less than 12 degrees centigrade. The minimum temperature required is more than 14 degrees. Sorry, can you please mute yourself, sir? There is even the small increase in temperature in temperate regions. They are more prone for the epidemics, especially the northern hemisphere of the globe. If you see the dengue mosquito, it is predominantly transmitted by Aedes aegypti and Aedes albopicus. These are the two species. They can usually travel less than 200 yards or 300 yards or less than half kilometer only. So that's why the surroundings are important. The areas, the cleanliness of the surroundings is utmost importance for the dengue transmission. This is the sylvatic forest cycle. This is used to be transmitted between the primates of the forest and the Aedes mosquito. Unfortunately, man is now having no boundaries and went to and taken the back the disease, and it is transmitting to the whole humankind now. These are the various resources, man-made resources for the transmission of the mosquitoes. These are coolers, water storage pots, tires, unused tires, coconut shells, disposable, all these things, open overhead tanks, water reservoirs, Egypti and Aedes albopicus vectors between the 16 and 30 degrees at the relative humidity of 60 to 80%. If the humidity is more and the survival of the mosquitoes is more and they can transmit the disease is much more. So various major manifestations or pathophysiology of the dengue hemorrhagic fever. We know that it starts with the very high grade temperatures of 102 to 104 with associated with anorexia and vomiting, which can lead to dehydration. And the hemorrhagic manifestations are which can be predicted by the positive tourniquet test. If you inflate the BP cuff between the systolic and diastolic BP for about 5 minutes, if you get more than 20 petechiae in an inch area, then it is suggestive of positive tourniquet test, and the patient may land in dengue hemorrhagic shock. There are other manifestations including hepatomegaly, which increased vascular permeability due to virus, which is the pathology is caused by the complement mediation, which leads to the leakage of plasma, which leads to again hemoconcentration, hypoproteinemia, and the pleural effusion and ascites, which lead to shock and death. The thrombocytopenia, not only thrombocytopenia, the thrombasthenia, wherever the platelets going down less than 1 lakh, and also the activity of the remained platelets also very bad, and it leads to coagulopathy and disseminated intravascular coagulation, which leads to severe bleeding, especially in the GI bleeding is common. Brain is rare, but it is detrimental. These are the major manifestations in a single slide I'll try to present. And these are the various manifestations in the other systems. If you see, the respiratory system is presented with the pulmonary edema, pulmonary hemorrhages, and acute respiratory distress syndrome. Even it can cause myocarditis, arrhythmias, and pericardial effusion. If you go to neurological system, it causes encephalitis, specific encephalitis, encephalopathy, intracranial bleed, especially in the basal ganglia, Guillain-Barré syndrome, and the febrile seizures in the children. It can also cause acalculous cholecystitis, that is one of the common characteristic feature of the dengue, the febrile diarrhea in the common in children, hepatitis, the fulminant hepatic failure, acute pancreatitis, bleeding from the pre-existing peptic ulcers, and there will be spontaneous splenic rupture in very rarely we can see with the dengue infection. And it can cause acute kidney injury, acute tubular necrosis, hemolytic uremic syndrome, and the metabolic abnormalities, including metabolic acidosis. This is our case, and there is a dengue encephalitis. This is a young gentleman presented with severe encephalitis. You can see this T2 and flare abnormalities in the pontine region and the bilateral thalami, and there is a diffusion restriction associated with the ADC mismatch, and there is no contrast enhancement on the post contrast, but this is appearing like a donut. This is also called as double donut sign, which is one of the characteristic of the dengue encephalitis. And we have seen almost 7 cases in the last 1 year. We don't know the cause, we don't know the treatment exactly. And many of the time, all the 7 patients, only 1 patient we could survive, we can save, and all the 6 patients were died because of this severe dengue encephalitis. And the others, dengue fever is commonly, these are the manifestations we have seen. What are the things? Dengue hemorrhagic fever 1, where the positive tourniquet test and the evidence of plasma leakage is present along with the thrombocytopenia, and the hematocrit rise is more than 20% over the baseline. Or the dengue hemorrhagic fever 2 is platelet count is less than 1 lakh plus hematocrit rise is more than 20% over the baseline plus abdominal pain, and there is in dengue hemorrhagic fever 3 already there is shock is ensued and the hypotension, cold clammy skin, and the restlessness is common. Dengue hemorrhagic 4 is profound shock with undetectable blood pressure and the pulse. This patient is almost, we cannot save these kind of dengue hemorrhage 4 category patients. Where these are, and the various differential diagnosis of dengue, it is quite common, all these diseases in our country, especially country like India, we cannot predict what is the exact disease. That's why we are treating, many of the times the physicians are giving all the medications, antibiotics, anti-malarial medications also along when we are in suspicion because of the unable to recognize the exact pathogen. Malaria typically presents with the fever and rigors. The presence of splenomegaly is common. And if you go to influenza, the upper respiratory symptoms are predominant. If you go to leptospirosis, there is a jaundice and conjunctival suffusion is common. And the meningococcal shock will be coincide with the high grade of temperature. And dengue shock is usually occurs after the defervescence rather than the immediate fever. And the chikungunya fever, there is small joints are predominantly involved rather than the large joint, and they are symmetric. If you go to scrub typhus, which is caused by Orientia tsutsugamushi, is a rickettsial disease. It is predominantly transmitted by a mite bite, and it can cause a eschar. It is a ulcer over the skin, and bleeding is uncommon in these patients. Viral exanthems like measles, mumps, rubella, the rash distribution is from the head to trunk and extremities, whereas the dengue, the transmission is, the rash is predominantly from the trunk to face and extremities. The acalculous cholecystitis and appendicitis, the gallbladder wall edema and USG due to plasma leakage is in dengue is one of the pathognomonic of the dengue as compared to the inflammation in cholecystitis and appendicitis. The primary HIV infection, there will be generalized lymphadenopathy and the lack of signs of plasma leakage are seen with HIV. These are the predominant differential diagnosis in viral hemorrhagic fevers. Diagnosis predominantly depends on the onset of symptoms. This is the primary infection which is caused by the mosquito bite. And if you see the viral antigen, NS1 antigen is rises in the first week. And the IgM antibody, which is the acute antibody, starts peaking from the day 2 to day 3, and it is gradually peaks in the first week, and it remains for that about 2 to 3 weeks. And IgG peaks up from the 8th to 10th day, and it may remain for the up to almost 6 months to 1 year also. But if a person gets secondary infection with another dengue serotype, there are 4 dengue serotypes, dengue serotype 1, 2, 3, and 4. If it is with another serotype, then the IgG will be again suddenly rises much more. The titers will be very high, and it can be identified with our ELISA test. And the NS1 and the secondary infection, the IgM starts peaking very early, and the IgM always suggests the acute infection. IgG suggests the chronic infection. IgG is not warranted for the treatment. Dengue IgG positivity means you should not treat the patient. It is need not. But dengue IgM positivity or dengue NS1 positivity suggests the acute infection with the dengue, and the patient warrants exactly treatment. And another disease I want to deal is malaria. About 40% of the world population is at risk of malaria, and about 500 million people are severely ill. The climate sensitive disease, to transmit the malaria, the Anopheles mosquito must live for more than 7 days. That's what we are targeting. We are targeting the mosquito's lifespan. We want to decrease the lifespan of mosquito by various repellents, various DDT and other measures. The Anopheles optimal adult development takes place between the 28 to 32 degrees centigrade. The Plasmodium falciparum transmission predominantly occurs between the 16 to 33 degrees centigrade. This is a wide range of temperature. There is a temperature below the 16 degrees and the altitudes of more than 1000 meters. The mosquito cannot survive and cannot transmit the disease. That's why the highland of malaria, the areas on the edges of the endemic regions are highlands. There is global warming also causing the increased transmission of the mosquitoes. In 2018, there were about 228 million cases of malaria worldwide, and there are about 4,05,000 deaths were reported from malaria. This is a malarial transmission map. You can see again the southern hemisphere is much more prone. Predominantly the African countries. The sad fact about the African countries is every 1 minute one child is dying because of the mosquito-borne diseases. That is the brunt of mosquito-borne diseases in the African countries. Fortunately, we are good, and even our India is now definitely on the good side of the malaria transmission. If you consider the malaria only, other diseases are not that much good, but malaria is, fortunately, we are on the decrease trend due to the use of artesunate elements in the treatment of malaria. But recently, even the artesunate resistance also found in the Plasmodium parasites. This is the transmission cycle of malaria, where you can see the mosquito bite. Mosquito bite causes the release of the infectious sporozoites into the human being. These sporozoites initially they go into the exoerythrocytic phase, that is in the liver cells. They will they will grow and they will release the shygians. These ruptured shygians go into the human blood, and these erythrocytic phases are important phases. They will develop in the these RBCs, and they will release the merozoites, gametocytes, and these gametocytes again will again go and enter into the mosquito. The problem is the primary host is not human being. Primary host is predominantly the mosquito. That is the problem. The sexual life cycle of the Plasmodium takes place in the mosquito, and the asexual life cycle is taking place in the human being. That is one of the major problems to make a vaccine against malaria also. And the human blood stages, immature trophozoites, initially they form ring stages. They will get into mature trophozoites. They will form the gametocytes and the shygians. The ruptured shygians will go and again they will form the another erythrocytic phase. Whereas the gametocytes, microgametocytes and macrogametocytes, the microgametocytes and macrogametocytes phase is again when the mosquito bites and when the mosquito feeds the blood, it will go into the mosquito and it will form the microgametocytes, exflagellates, and it will enter into the macrogametocyte and it forms a ookinete stage. And this ookinete phase form a cyst in the oocyst, and it will form the it will release the sporozoites, which are again the infectious forms of Plasmodium. So if you see this is the infectious phases where the sporozoites, this is the sporozoites. This is the sporozoite enters into the human body and causing all the problems. And this is having a typical structure which is useful for easy transmission into the liver cell. Once it is injected, it will very fastly go. Within hours, it will go into the liver and it starts its life cycle. And these are the stages of diagnosis, what we will find: the ring stages, the trophozoite phases, the shygians, and the gametocytes we found in the RBC. And we will try to diagnose the disease by the identification of these cells in the RBC. And this is the... Can you please mute yourself, sir? Yeah, this is the Anopheles mosquito. This is the Anopheles mosquito transmitting, and there are various climatic impacts on malaria transmission. Particularly, children and pregnant women are vulnerable, and there are potential direct and indirect pathways of influence are there, like Anopheles mosquitoes with vectors, and there is the host vector and pathogen environmental influence is there. This is a malarial endemicity. Fortunately, we are not in this red zone, we are in the green zone. Uh, and the endemicity in India, if you see, the annual parasite index is more than 10 and above in only few areas of our country. Fortunately, many of ours are the less than one only. So it is on the good side. If we see the malaria, various symptoms, the fever with actually 3 grades of fever, like initially chill phase, followed by high grade temperature, followed by sweat phase. Now we are not seeing this phase because of the taking of paracetamol by the patients and disturbing the regular cycle. The quotidian fever, the quartan fever, tertian fever, these are very difficult to see because many patients are taking antibiotics on their own and paracetamol, and all these causing the natural disease course is altered. And there are the various symptoms include fever, vomiting, diarrhea, cough, difficult breathing, seizures, the high-grade temperatures, jaundice, hepatomegaly, palpable spleen, respiratory system symptoms including altered consciousness, abnormal postures, abnormal tendon reflexes are vary according to the age. If it is age more than 5 years, the symptomatology is different. If it is age less than 5 years, the symptomatology is different. How we diagnose malaria? Yeah, usually we diagnose by microscopy or rapid diagnostic test. And the microscopy, we have to take the smear for the thick smear and thin smear. Thick smear is for whether the parasite is there or not. If thin smear is to isolate the typing of the parasite, whether it is vivax, whether it is falciparum, whether it is oval, whether it is malaria, whether it is an oval C. But in our country, only about recently till 2013, there are no cases of Plasmodium ovale, but even Plasmodium ovale is also identified in the almost 7 states of India, and now we are having all the 4 serotypes, but predominantly Vivax and Falciparum are common. That's why they have developed the rapid diagnostic test, which are the simple toolkits where they can diagnose only Plasmodium vivax and Falciparum. Just thing is, you have to drop a blood and blood drop, and you have to wait for about 5 minutes. You will get the double strip. If it is positive, that is suggestive of Falciparum or vivax. If it is only control is positive, that is suggestive of negative test. And the advanced tests, which are the resource limiting in our country, nucleic acid amplification test, PCR tests, they are costly. They are for the actually researching purpose only. This is the microscopy showing the ring stage of the RBC. These are the WBCs. These are the normal RBCs. You can see this is the ring stage of the RBC. You can see various types of others also. Some few RBCs are there with the ring stages, and the gametocytes also we can see within the RBCs, and these are the only stages we can see in the RBCs in a microscopy. And the another disease I want to discuss is Japanese encephalitis. There are Japanese encephalitis is caused by JE virus. Again, it is transmitted by the mosquito, and these are the various states. If you see whole southern India like Telangana, Andhra, Tamil Nadu, Karnataka, some part of the Kerala and UP, and these are the major states. Now it is almost endemic in about 135 districts among the 740 districts in India, and the 14 states are affected. If you see now Uttar Pradesh, especially in the areas of Gorakhpur, Kushinagar, the Maharajganj, Sant Kabir Nagar and Siddhartha Nagar, these are the 5 common districts where the Japanese encephalitis is quite common, and I hope Yogi is taking beautiful steps to eliminate this dangerous disease. And the horses are the primary affected domestic animals of the Japanese encephalitis through essentially a dead-end host, but unfortunately, pigs act as amplifiers of the virus, producing high viremic loads which infect mosquitoes, and mosquitoes come and infect the human beings. This is a natural cycle. This is only seen with the ordered birds. It usually used to infect these ordered birds, but unfortunately, these mosquitoes are infecting the pigs, and the pigs again the mosquitoes feed on the pigs and coming on to infect the humans. That's why these mosquitoes are acting like a amplifier host. So these are the various mosquito vectors: Culex tritinorhynchus, Culex vishnui, Culex gelius. Even few species of Anopheles can transmit the JE virus. This is the Culex trichinorhynchus. If you see, I have shown all the three types of mosquitoes like Aedes mosquito and Anopheles mosquito, Culex mosquito. These all the mosquitoes are having different properties. Anopheles mosquito can travel up to 20 kilometers. Aedes mosquito can travel up to only half a kilometer. Culex up to 1 to 2 miles. And they are sitting differently. They are pointing differently. Their siphon is different. So every mosquito is having different characteristics to transmit the pathogen. So these are the common breeding habitats for the rice fields, shallow pools, ditches are the common breeding habitats for the mosquitoes. And the mortality is about 5 to 35% is quite high in human beings. The problem is if a person dies, that is okay. But the serious neurological sequelae are very bothersome with the Japanese encephalitis because of the CNS involvement. So what is the pathogenesis? The virus enters the body through the bite of the insect, through the mosquitoes. After multiplication in the local and regional lymph nodes, the viremia of varying duration ensues, and this virus is gradually transmitted to the end organ, especially via brain, via the blood, and virus proliferates and damages the neuronal tissue and thereby elicits the nervous manifestations. The incubation period is about 5 to 15 days. Only 1 in 300 to 1,000 infections can develop encephalitis, and the rest are asymptomatic, fortunately. The prodromal stage is fever, headache, GI disturbances, and the acute encephalitic phase, the fever is very high grade from the about 100 to 104 degrees centigrade associated with neck rigidity, and there will be focal CNS signs including hemiparesis, seizures, and altered sensorium progressing to coma. And in the late stages, the temperature and ESR comes to normal, but the neurological signs become stationary, and they may improve, they may not improve, they may lead to sequelae. The case fatality rate is quite high. The differential diagnosis includes, these are the differential diagnosis: meningitis, febrile seizures, the Reye syndrome, which is predominantly caused by the influenza viruses. When the patients are taking aspirin, it can cause the hepatitis as well as CNS manifestation. Rabies, especially when there is a dog bite or any canid bite, this should be suspected. The cerebral malaria and toxic encephalopathy with the mercury and carbon monoxide and methanol consumption can similarly mimic the picture of Japanese encephalitis. So the laboratory diagnosis is by antibody titers. Japanese encephalitis specific IgM in serum or CSF can be isolated. The virus isolation can be possible with CSF sample or from the brain tissue. And there is no specific treatment, only supportive treatment with the fluids and anti-seizure medication. They are trying with the benzodiazepine. They have tried with many drugs but failed. This is a case of Japanese encephalitis. This is the hallmark picture of Japanese encephalitis MRI brain. You can see the almost symmetrical, bilateral symmetrical thalamic hemorrhages. T2 flare hyperintensities are seen with the Japanese encephalitis. This is the hallmark MRI brain picture of Japanese encephalitis. And another important aspect of our talk is acute diarrheal diseases. The magnitude of the problem is quite high. This is almost 80% of the diarrheal deaths are occurring in the less than 2 years of age group. And what is acute watery diarrhea? It is lasts less than 14 days and involves the passage of frequent loose or watery stools without visible blood. When the blood flicks are there, blood streaks are there, then it is called as dysentery. It is predominantly caused by Shigella species. The predisposing factors are undernutrition, recent measles infection where your mucosal immunity is invades, and there will be immunodeficiency like HIV and other protein energy malnutrition, especially the first 2 years of life, maximum at the age of 6 to 11 months. Why? Because this is a weaning period. Child starts crawling, child starts taking the solid food, and there is decreased levels of maternal antibodies which used to protect the child up to 6 months, and there is a lack of active immunity in the infant that is not yet developed, and infant starts to crawl. The commonest things are like rotavirus is throughout the year, and the bacterial infections are common in the summer and rainy seasons. The Vibrio cholerae and Shigellosis, they can cause epidemics also. These are the enteropathogens: rotavirus, enterotoxigenic E. coli, Shigella, Campylobacter jejuni is having a dangerous sequelae of Guillain-Barré syndrome. Vibrio cholerae, it causes so many pandemics, and it is the greatest epidemic master. The Salmonella, it causes typhoid, Cryptosporidium parvum, all other parasite infections which are commonly seen in the HIV patients. the pathogenesis of viral diarrheas, bacterial diarrheas, and there is bacterial diarrheas invasion. Various types of diarrheas are there: secretory diarrhea, osmotic diarrhea, inflammatory diarrhea. But I am unable to discuss all these in a limited period of time. But I am touching the important things, that the consequences of watery diarrhea, when there is loss of a lot of fluid, it leads to loss of bicarbonate in the stool. It can lead to metabolic acidosis. There will be poor renal blood flow. There will be production of lactic acid, low bicarbonates, and the pH goes down to less than 7.1, and there will be metabolic acidosis. And the potassium will be lost in the stools, and it leads to the weakness of the muscles as well as paralytic failure. Again, it will lead to subacute intestinal obstruction. These are the commonest infections. Cholera commonly infects the small bowel. Shigella. This is the commonest Shigella. There are almost 4 or 5 species: Shigella soni, Shigella flexneri, Shigella boydi. All these causes large bowel. Shigella dysentery is a dangerous variety. The rotavirus is the commonest cause of virus for the diarrhea in the adults. And the enterotoxigenic E. coli, it is the commonest cause of travelers diarrhea in India or elsewhere. Enteroinvasive E. coli, it is infect the large bowel. Salmonella typhi, it causes small and large bowel infection, causes enteric fever. Giardia, small bowel, and amoebiasis, large bowel. There are persistent diarrhea when the diarrhea lasts for more than 14 days. The chronic diarrhea, when it is not due to infectious cause, it is called as chronic diarrhea. And the enteric fever, another entity is common in India is enteric fever, as it is poor sanitation conditions. Enteric fever is still common in the developing countries. It is an acute generalized infection by the intestinal lymphoid tissues and reticuloendothelial system and gallbladder. It is caused by the Salmonella typhi. This is the viral, this is the bacterial Salmonella typhi structure. It is having O antigen, cell wall polysaccharide, and the H antigen is a flagellar antigen. VI antigen is for the virulence. And the epidemiology, it is almost exclusively seen in humans. It is transmitted by the contaminated food, milk, water, by flies from the human excreta to the food, poor personal hygiene, poor sanitation. It is usually common in the older children and young adults of more than 5 years. It is underdeveloped and poor areas. The annual occurrence peak is throughout the year, but July to August is quite high. Incubation period is 1 to 2 weeks, and it can range up to 60 days. Infectivity period carries sometimes even the lifelong also. This is the epidemiology of global distribution. There are endemic areas, hyperendemic areas, and the epidemic mode, and there is sporadic mode. If you see the high area, India is having high endemicity. When the more than 100 cases per 1 lakh people, that is the high endemic area, Indian average is about 493. They calculated as 493 cases per every 1 lakh population. Such a high endemicity area for typhoid fever is India. This is the routes of transmission, the fecal-oral transmission, and there is it multiplies in the intraluminal, and then it will go to the various lymphoid tissues. It will releases the endotoxins. It damages the other systems. It can go to the CNS, and it can cause serious manifestations. It can invade any structure. You name it, any structure. It can invade bone, skin, CNS, and anything. Everything is infected with typhoid fever. It causes the perforation of especially the terminal ileum is affected. The cecum is involved by the typhoid bacilli, and it can cause this vertical shaped ulcers. If you see, the same ileum is infected by tuberculosis, but the ulcers are transversely shaped. Here, the typhoid is vertically shaped ulcers are characteristic of this typhoid. It is usually infect the Peyer's patches of the intestines, and the necrosis of these Peyer's patches leads to the perforation, and major blood vessel perforation may lead to severe blood loss and even the death also. Even it can go into the liver and gallbladder and other reticuloendothelial tissues. It can go into bones, and it can cause chronic osteomalacia, chronic osteomyelitis, and it can go into spleen. It can cause spleen rupture, solid viscera, heart, and it can cause even infective endocarditis. So there is fever of acute onset with initially at low grade temperatures, and at the end of first week to second week, the temperatures will be very high grade. It is called as step ladder pattern. of fever. This is usually seen in the adults. This is the classic step-ladder pattern of fever with typhoid. Initial incubation period, it is asymptomatic. Then invasion phase, there is oscillating fever of low grades and gradually increases up to 104 degrees centigrade. Then there is a phase of constant typhoid state, and there will be diarrhea and splenomegaly, and it will lead to the gradual decrement of the evolution phase. And these are the other symptoms: myalgias, anorexia, vomiting, constipation is common in the adults, toxic loop, pain in the abdomen, headache, cough. On the clinical examination, there is a coated tongue with a V-shaped, and there is a tenderness of the abdomen, soft splenomegaly, hepatomegaly, rhonchi or crepes are common in the chest. With rosy spots are not common in our Indian people, and you can see in the fair textured people. And the mild to moderate anemia, meningismus is plus or minus, and this jaundice is rare. These are the various manifestations of the CNS. It can cause encephalopathy and muttering type of delirium, seizures, and there is GI hemorrhages can be seen, especially in the terminal ileum, and the respiratory and the other secondary infections with the bronchopneumonia can be seen. Myocarditis, and it can cause chronic osteomyelitis, septic arthritis. It can cause alopecia. Few young ladies are coming with alopecia after 2 to 3 months of this typhoid, because it causes the telomeric phase infection of the hair, and it can cause UTI in about 20 to 25% of the case. Especially diabetics are prone for UTI with salmonella. The miscellaneous things like otitis media, unilateral parotitis, purpuric eruptions, epistaxis, thrombosis all are seen with the typhoid. And what is the diagnostic modality? In the first week, we can diagnose from the blood culture or the clad culture, but bone marrow culture, it can yield up to 80 to 90% in the first week. The second week is our common test, our famous test. This is Vidal test, but it is having so many false positive and so many false negatives. So, and it is not a reliable test in our country like hyperendemic area. The third week you can do stool culture, and the fourth week you can do urine culture for the identification of the salmonella. Agglutination test, the problem is only O agglutation is important in the recent infection. H agglutinate indicates the past infection or immunization. And the titers, more than 4-fold titers. Normally 40 is the titer. More than 160 or more than 320 is absolutely suggestive. And if you do a test on this date, and after 7 days, if the titer is doubled, that is more suggestive of typhoid rather than the because this is not a sensitive test. There are so many false positives because of the immunization with the vaccine. There are the repeated subclinical infections, past infection, healthy carriers, the anamnestic response. With secondary infection, there are so many antibodies, patients have cirrhosis and hepatitis. The false negatives are also common because of the irrational use of antibiotics. There are so many non-specific lab findings for the typhoid diagnosis. There are clues, in fact. There is mild normochromic anemia, mild thrombocytopenia, leukopenia. Leukocytosis is common in children. Eosinopenia, this suggests even the patient is about to recover. An increased reassert, laboratory evidence of mild disseminated intravascular coagulation. There will be hyponatremia, hypokalemia, SGOT elevation more than SGPT of liver, and urine sometimes can give proteins and white blood cells in the common urine examination. And there will be, these are the various things of differential diagnosis. If you see the mumps, commonest season is winter and spring, and the clinical features: fever, headache, muscle aches. The problem is parotitis, either usually bilateral or unilateral. We can see and there is protrusion of the EO, and the clinical suspicion is important with the significant rise of mumps IgG titer, IgM antibody. The real-time PCR oral of buccal swab is important. It is having the predominant predilection for the glandular tissue like parotid gland, submandibular gland, or epidermis, architis, euphoritis are common with this. And if it infects the CNS, it will exhibit a lymphocytic pleocytosis, and the sugars in the CSF will be very low with mumps. This is one of the important exception for the mumps. And the differential diagnosis of mumps are these: the complications it can lead to aseptic meningitis, orchitis, mastitis, breast inflammation, and the chickenpox. It is caused by the varicella virus. It is the humans are the main reservoirs. The period of infectivity is 2 days before the onset of the rash, and then after even the lesion, till the lesions are crusted. That's why it is dangerous. And the season is predominantly from the January to May. The clinical presentation is 11 to 21 days incubation period, and there will be centripetal distribution of the rash. Initially starts on the face and stung the maculopapular teardrop-like vesicles with cloudy and crusting. The pleomorphism is quite expected. There are various stages of lesions, like initially they are having some vesicular structure, and they are initially reddish followed by brownish, blackish, and there will be crusting. They are intensely pruritic, very itchy, and the lesions also occur on the mucosa also. This is a pleomorphic rash. You can see various types of rashes. Some are having crusted already, some are brown, some are starting, some are having vesicular lesions. So this is the risk factors: first month of life and the delivery before the 28 weeks, adolescence and adulthood, immunocompromised states, especially in the HIV, and the pregnant women, mainly IgM antibody by PCR. Usually the diagnosis is clinical, but if you want exact diagnosis, if you want, that is you can do, but and the encephalitis typically post-infectious with cerebellar involvement. This is varicella cerebellar. The most common post-viral cerebellitis is varicella. So whenever a patient is having the history of rash over the body in the last 15 days and now presenting with ataxia, you can suspect post-viral cerebellitis. This is the shingles herpes zoster infection. It dormantly stays in the dorsal root ganglia of the spinal cord. Whenever your immunity goes off, it will erupt these lesions in the dermatomal distribution. Then that is suggestive of, at least you have to check the blood sugar, because this is suggestive of, especially the age more than 60 years, it is quite common. You have to check their immunocompromisation. The measles, again, the Orthomyxoviridae family. It is highly contagious disease, it's a respiratory infection. There are so many high-grade fever, cough, running nose, like URTI symptoms, and the rash starts immediately with the fever, and there are specific poplic spots on the buccal mucosa in front of the molars. This is one of the characteristic rash. This is on the whitish rash on the reddish background. These are characteristic poplic spots of the measles. They usually seen in only 30 to 40%, but they are characteristic of measles. So there are many complications: pneumonia, encephalitis, of ear infections, diarrhea, and this is life-threatening acute sclerosing panencephalitis. The virus stays and dormant in the CNS for about 7 to 13 years, and then it shows the manifestation, and the patients will die. We have seen 7 patients. All the 7 patients died with SSP. The measles spreads very easily. It is a so contagious disease. That's why we have to vaccinate all the children according to the immunization schedule. So vaccination is the best protection against the measles. And thank you. I rushed because it is very difficult to cover all the diseases in a 1 hour time. Thank you. Thank you, one and all.